Okay, so we're going to start off looking at deriving the characteristic equations for D, SR, T, JK flip-flops. And for the SR flip-flop, we are to assume that the SR equals 1, 1 input is not possible. So we have to know how these flip-flops work. If you don't know how the flip-flops work, I recommend that you go to part 2 of the worksheet that has basic information on flip-flops and latches. It's called worksheet 1 for bizarre reasons, but it's part 2 of this, and there's lots of videos on that. So, but in general, we'll start with the easy one, which is D. And the thing with the D flip-flop that you can remember is that Q follows D. Whatever D is, that's going to be what Q is. And so our table that we would draw, so we'd have a D and a Q, and then we'll have Q star. So Q star is what the next value of Q is. And since we have these two inputs here, that means we have 4 possibilities. We could have 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. Although we didn't really need the second column there because with a D flip-flop, the previous value of Q doesn't matter. A lot of times the previous value of Q does matter. In this instance, it doesn't. Q star is only going to be whatever D is before. So Q star is going to be 0 here and 1 here. So that is the table that shows you the values for a D flip-flop. And so our characteristic equation, now we can do a Carnot map, and we will just for fun, but you don't really need to because you can see what it is. But if we did a Carnot map, where we have D and Q, 0, 1, 0, 1, and we fill it in. So that's where we get those values, and here we go, we circle those, and for those, what do they have in common? They have in common that D is 1, and so our characteristic equation is that Q star equals D. So that was a lot of work that we didn't really need to do, because we know what the characteristic equation is for a D flip-flop. Q star is D, so we could have just gone straight to that. Now, the others get a little bit harder, and so let's do T next. So we have the value of T, and we have the value of Q, and we have the value of Q star, and again 2 variables, so we have 4 possible inputs. And the T flip-flop, the T stands for toggle, but you only toggle when T is 1. When T is 0, there's no change. And so for these first two where T is 0, there's no change. That means Q star is going to be what Q was before. So in this case, we really do need to have Q there, because Q star is going to be what Q was before. So Q star will be 0 here and 1 here. Now, when T is 1, then Q toggles. That means it's going to be the complement of what it was before. And so for this next one, it will be Q was 0 before, now it'll be 1. Q was 1 before, now it'll be 0. And now I'll make a little Carnot map. And I'll have T on top and Q on the side. 0, 1, 0, 1. And 0, 0 was 0. T0, Q1 was 1. T1 and Q0 was 1. and both 1 they were 0. So that's my best cover for that one. And so that one, there's, is not much simplifying there. So Q star is going to equal this top one. We have T is 1 and Q is 0. So that's T Q bar plus, and in the bottom one, T is 0 and Q is 1. So that's T bar Q. Okay, so now we'll do JK. Okay, so we have a J, a K, and a Q. So we have 8 different possibilities for our variables. And you have to remember how the JK flip-flop works. Most of the time, it doesn't matter, well, half of the time. Half of the time, it doesn't matter what Q was before. So when, I always forget which one is which. J is set and K is reset. So when you have J equal to 1 and K equal to 0, that's a set, so that'll make it 1. And when you have K equal to 1 and J equal to 0, that's a reset, and that'll make it equal to 0. But if J and K are both 0, then there's no change. So JK both 0, no change. So this J in this first line, J and K are both 0, there's no change, so Q star will be 0. Second row, J and K are both 0, so there's no change, so Q star will be 1. In the third row, K is 1 and J is 0. When K is 1 and J is 0, that's a reset. That means that Q star will be 0. Doesn't matter what Q was before, Q star is going to be 0. And in the fourth row, the same thing is true. J is 0, K is 1. That's a reset, so Q star will be 0. Now, when J is 0, when J is 1 and K is 0, that's a set. So when J is 1 and K is 0, you get 1, no matter what. Doesn't matter what Q was before. So for the next two, you get 1. And when J and K are both 1, then you get a toggle. So Q star will be the complement of whatever Q was before. So in this seventh row, J and K are both 1. Q is 0. Q star will be 1. It'll be the opposite. And here, J and K are both 1. Q is 1, so Q star will be 0. So now if we do our Carnot map, we'll have JK up here and Q here, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Alright, so let's see. Where do we have 1s? We have 1s here, so JK is 1, 0, and Q is 0. JK is 1, 0, and Q is 1. And JK is 1, 1, and Q is 0. And I think I'm missing one more. Yes. JK is 0, 0, and Q is 1. Except I have one of these in the wrong place. Yes. I did my Carnot map wrong. None of you stopped me. It should be 1, 0. 1, 1, and then 1, 0, which meant I had this in the wrong place. So 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. Okay, so now if I group these two together and then this one wraps around, then I get that Q star equals, on these top two, let's see, what do we have in common? We have that J is 1 and Q is 0. So that's J Q bar. And on the bottom ones, what we have in common is that K is 0 and Q is 1, so that's K bar Q. And I can take my computer over to the podium, and for those of you who don't have seats, would it be easier to like write on the table so I can pull the table over and y'all can use that?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. All right. And then our last one was for SR. So SR is very similar to JK, except we are to assume that the SR equals 1, 1 input is not possible. So for this one, I'm just going to say it's really going to be the same as JK. JK and SR are the same, except that 1, 1 is not possible for SR. So I can replace the J and the K with an S and an R. So S and R. So it's the same as that, except that the difference is going to be the 1, 1 is not possible, so those are now don't cares. So it's the same exact table, except now those bottom rows are don't cares. So now if I make my Carnot map, I have don't cares in that column, and I have, let's see, I have a 1 here, and I have 1 here and here. So now, the correct covering of this, I can use those don't cares to make a bigger group. So I can circle those together, and then I can use those. And so that square over there, so that gives me Q star equals, and in that square, what do we have in common? That S is 1. So that's just S. And then on this one that wraps around, what we have in common is that R is 0 and Q is 1. So that's R bar Q. So now we have made the characteristic equations for those flip-flops. So any questions? I'm recording this. I'm gonna stop the recording. I'm gonna do it problem by problem.